Hi, I'm Dan Oshinsky, and thank you so much for joining me today for the session about lessons from the world of newsletters. Now, I'm a big believer that there's a lot that people in the email marketing space can learn if they just look to a different part of the inbox, and that's the newsletter space. There are a lot of great newsletters out there. I've gotten a chance to work on some myself, work on some with clients, and I want to share some lessons today about what I think newsletters are doing so well that email marketers might want to borrow and steal as part of their own strategy. So today I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about why audience and content-centric approaches make such a difference for newsletters. I want to talk about what newsletters do that's really unique when it comes to growth and engagement, because as you look at the newsletter space, there are a lot of great examples of teams doing both. And lastly, I want to talk about how newsletters monetize, how they sell stuff, and what we can learn from newsletters about how they sell in a slightly different way than what you might be trying with your own strategy. As for me, well, my name's Dan. I used to be the director of newsletters at both BuzzFeed and The New Yorker, and for the past 5 years, I've worked on this little consulting business called Inbox Collective. I also have a newsletter and a website all about newsletters. Check it out. Would love to have you there as well. And I want to share some lessons today from things that I've worked on, things from BuzzFeed, things from The New Yorker, certainly things from the past 5 years of Inbox Collective, lessons that I've seen about the newsletter space that I do think are going to apply and to the work that you're doing and help you get more out of the strategy that you have for your emails. Let's dive in. Let's start here with content strategy because newsletters do content a little bit differently. Often, when I talk with friends in the email marketing space, when they're talking about their strategy, it starts with what they're selling, how much they're selling, what they need to sell to hit their goals. And when I work with newsletters, the conversation almost always starts with content. It's a little bit different. Here's what I mean by content. First off, newsletters are really built around personality. Some of the best newsletters out there are personality driven, they're written by a human, they have a really unique voice. I think a lot about the great Ian Hanley line, which is with so many newsletters, people remember the news and forget about the letter. With a lot of the best newsletters that are out there, the letter is certainly not an afterthought. It is upfront, it is the centerpiece of what they're building, whether it's something from a large newsroom like The Information or something from an individual writer. There are so many people now who have their own newsletters. I love what Maya is doing with Sifter, which is a newsletter covering news in Ethiopia. Really, really cool. Check it out. In both cases, you have people trying to put a personality and a voice up front. And these emails feel a lot less like a piece of marketing and a lot more like a note from a friend. It's part of the reason they do so well. But emails aren't just about voice. They're also built on, I think, three key pillars. One is a clearly identified audience. Two is a clearly identified job. And third, a clearly identified sense of why they matter and why someone would want to make space for these in the inbox. I'll start with audience. I really think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is when they try to write a newsletter for everybody. I always encourage teams to go a little bit deeper. Think about your ideal reader. What do they care about? What are they motivated by? What do they do for work? What are they interested in besides your newsletter, of course? The more specific that you can get, the better. Now, there are plenty of newsletters out there. The Skim is a great example where they start with a really defined audience. The Skim 12 years ago, 13 years ago, was a newsletter for millennial women. And now it has blossomed into this product that could be for just about anybody. But they started with that specific audience, and their strategy was better for it because they could cater every part of their strategy, content, growth, engagement, monetization, to that ideal audience. One of the things that always makes me cringe is when I get emails in my inbox from readers who go, I'm launching this newsletter, it's going to be great. And I go, who's it for? Who do you think the audience is for this? And they'll say, well, the audience is everybody. Everyone should be a reader of my newsletter. The truth is, too many newsletters are for everybody, and a lot of the newsletters that are for everybody are really for nobody. Every email should have a really specific audience in mind. On newsletters that I've worked on in the past, have even thought about a specific person or two who I know is reading the email. And when I think about sending it, before I send it, I think, all right, how is this person going to react? Am I missing something? Is the tone right? Is the voice right? Is there anything that I need to add to serve them? The more specific the audience, the better. Once you have that specific audience in mind, then you start to think about the job of the newsletter. What does this newsletter do for the reader? What is the thing that they're going to get out of it that's going to make it valuable? The truth is, a lot of newsletters that aren't as good, and there are plenty of bad newsletters out there, a lot of the newsletters that struggle because there isn't a clear audience and there isn't a clear job. Sometimes when I work with newsrooms, in particular, older newsrooms, maybe they have a daily newsletter that's basically just an RSS feed. You've seen these. It's a list of stories in descending order, published in reverse chronological order. I'll ask them, what does this newsletter do for readers? And they'll say, oh, that's easy. The newsletter gets people back to our website. Well, no, that's what it does for you, the publisher. It gets them back to the website. But we can't run a pop-up or a landing page on our website that says, sign up for our newsletter. It's the number one way to get back to this website. That would seem ridiculous. We got to give people a reason. And when I look at jobs for newsletters, I typically see five big ones. One is education. We want to inform a reader. We want to teach them something. We want them to learn about a topic. But that could take a lot of different forms. You could build a newsletter around making sure people are the first to know about a topic. Maybe you want to go deeper on a certain topic. I love this example from the Pew Research Center. This came out after the Dobbs decision a few years ago. Everyone in the world knew about this big decision. They said, we have a unique perspective to offer. We can inform you about what happens next. What are these trends? How do Americans feel about this? Let's advance the story. Pretty interesting angle. I like when teams like, this is an example on the right from Global Health Now, they cover global health, and a lot of their newsletters about making sure you're aware of what's happening in the world. There are tons of global health stories. We can't cover them all, but we can make sure you are informed and can catch up pretty quickly on some of the big ones. It's a good way to inform and educate an audience. Lots of different ways underneath that education kind of umbrella that you might educate or inform. Some newsletters are built around connection. You want to create a sense of belonging in your community. You want people to, feel like they know some of the players that are involved or amplify certain voices. Really cool. I love how the Chicago Sun-Times does this with their daily newsletter. Every day they highlight a lot of different stories. Many of them are, newsy stories. They're tough to read. They're about difficult subjects. So they close every email with this section called a bright one where they highlight a couple things, or usually just, really one big thing that they think is really valuable. That makes you feel better about living in Chicago. It's cool, it's valuable, you feel more connected to your community. Some newsletters are built around driving some sort of engagement or conversation. I love how the Wall Street Journal does this with their newsletter. I think it's really smart. Every day they ask questions of readers, tell us what you think about X. They reply, and they highlight some of the best answers in the newsletter. It's a way to start a little bit of a conversation or even a debate with readers about a subject that maybe you hadn't considered another side on. Pretty cool. A lot of newsletters are built around driving people to take action. And that could be some sort of direct action that's related to your work or your job. In this case, this example from Jacksonville Today, when they launched their newsletter, they told me they had two big goals. One is they wanted to inform their readers, make sure they knew about things that were happening in their area. And two is they wanted people to actually get involved. It wasn't enough to just read about these things that were happening. They wanted people to show up and volunteer, show up for city council meetings, ask questions of the mayor, take part in their communities. And they wanted to know, is that possible? And the answer is, yeah, we can do both within a newsletter. Totally fine to have multiple jobs within a single newsletter. Lastly, a lot of newsletters are built around entertainment. We want you to find something new to try, get a good deal, be the first to know about something. That's great. And like I said, you can have multiple jobs within a newsletter. In a lot of newsletters, you'll see people try to inform readers, educate readers, try to connect with readers and maybe inform them or drive some sort of action. Totally okay to have multiple actions within an email. Just think about how you structure your newsletter to support each of those jobs. Once you have the jobs, then the last piece is figuring out the why. Why is this valuable? How will we explain to readers that this newsletter has real value? I've been in the space for a dozen years, and I have yet to meet someone who said, "Oh, I wish there were more newsletters that I could sign up for. If only there were more newsletters to sign up for." Nobody's looking for more newsletters to sign up for, so we have to tell them why this newsletter is worth signing up for, why this newsletter is worth making space for in your inbox. You'll know you have it right when you can explain your newsletter in a single sentence. Here's how an org like Boulder Reporting Lab does it. They could do the generic thing that a lot of local newsrooms do: sign up for our newsletter, stay informed. They go a little bit deeper. Stay in the know like never before, implying that not only will we keep you informed, but we're going to go a little bit deeper than you ordinarily would expect from a newsletter like ours. Semaphore Principles. Love a lot of the stuff they're doing. And I really think this call to action, this why, is super important. Semaphore Principles, it's what the White House is reading. They're emphasizing that there are people at high levels of government who read this email, which is all about what's happening in Washington, D.C. So you're going to want to join them too. You're not going to want to miss out. There's a FOMO aspect to it that they've identified with their job to be done, and they've incorporated that into their why. Lastly, this is strategy breakdowns. So simple and so straightforward. Learn the strategies that built the world's greatest companies. You know right away what you're getting into and why that might be valuable, and why you'd want it in your inbox. They have the audience, they have the job, they have the why. Next up, newsletters do a really good job of learning more about their audience over time. They're not just going to settle for click data or what people, what data we can kind of assume based on what their behavior might be on the website. No, no, no. We're going to ask people to tell us a little bit more about themselves. Orgs do this like Politico Pulse. They ask right at the point of sign up. Tell us a little bit more. They're going through the art of progressive profiling. They're asking for information. Tell us your industry. Tell us your employer. Tell us a little bit more so we can best serve you. I love how Workweek does this. They do a fabulous job with their newsletters. This is one from Adam Ryan, who writes their media newsletter. Such a good example of this. You sign up for his media newsletter, and then he asks you afterwards for a little bit more information in a survey. What kind of media do you work in? Is it B2B or B2C? What kind of media company do you work at? Where do you work? What's your job title? So, for instance, if Adam decides he wants to put on an event for media CEOs who work in B2B media and live in Austin, Texas, well, he can really easily find those folks. He's already identified them through this survey as part of the onboarding process. A lot of teams do this in other places too. Last week in AWS asks as part of their welcome series in the email, choose one of these, which best fits who you are, and then tags people to identify them. Some teams like Axios, if you're downloading a lead magnet, will ask for a little bit more information. The more we can collect, the better we can target, the better we can personalize emails for you. Great newsletters also know that design isn't just about the art. It's not just about how they look in terms of traditional kind of design. I often talk with organizations, in particular magazines, that want to make their email look exactly like the magazine. I tell them that's a mistake. Let's focus on the content and how people scroll and move through an email, using white space, using bolding, interesting colors like Punchbowl News does, or mixing in different sections that change your eye line. I love how as you're scrolling through an email like this, they'll get longer sections with more text and then shorter ones that really break things up. So a reader doesn't get, caught up just kind of scrolling passively. No, no, no. Something catches their eye and makes them pause and keep reading. Really, really cool. Some of the best newsletters out there, some of my favorites, are text only. 1440, they just hit 4 million subscribers. Amazing open rates, a text only email. They use bolding, they use bullets, they use sections in really smart ways. Or, and I'm just so thrilled I get to share this example live today. Pop Bitch, a newsletter based in the UK, text only email, but they use some really creative kind of like old school internet elements. They use bolding, they use different sections to try to break things up so you scroll and really engage with the content. As long as the email is easy to navigate, they're using white space in creative ways. For instance, the newsletter is accessible to everybody. You can get value from it. Love these examples. As you're thinking about content, that naturally then leads to engagement sorts of questions. How do we get people to engage with our newsletter in a way that feels really natural and exciting? My first experience with email, my first really understanding of why email was powerful, actually didn't come from the inbox. My first job out of college, I worked at a CBS station in San Antonio, Texas, and I got to see the relationship that our on-air talent, our anchors and reporters had with our viewing public. They would be out at events. San Antonio's a really big small town. There were lots of parades and things, and I'd often be out there and see, our viewers just come right up to anchors and our reporters and just start talking to them as though they'd known them for years. And the truth was, they kind of did because we were on in the living room every single day. People had a relationship with them. Email is very much a digital living room. The only difference between email and broadcast TV is that people can actually hit reply and talk back to you. They can share feedback with you. And some of the best newsletters really put an emphasis on this one-to-one engagement. So here's a good example, something that I've done for 5+ years now with Inbox Collective. Every reader who signs up for my newsletter gets this welcome email. And I ask, what's your newsletter? What are you struggling with right now? Hit reply, let me know. I write back to every single person who writes back to me. It's at this point 3,000 plus emails that I've replied to over the years. It's a lot. It takes a lot of time. I have to reply to some every single day, but it's one of the best ways to drive engagement, to build loyal readers. I also get a lot of content ideas that come from it. If you're going to ask something specific. Don't just ask a generic thing. Don't just say, hit reply if you have any feedback. It's not going to get any answers. Ask something specific. Open up the possibility that people can reply and you can talk back to them. And you can think about how to streamline this too to make it easier. A newsletter like Tangle, for instance, does a great job with this. They'll ask people to take polls and reshare that feedback. Here's how readers like you feel about a certain issue in the news. So readers see themselves echoed back and what's happening in this larger conversation. They'll also invite readers to write in with questions that then get answered in the email. I asked a couple months ago their founder, Isaac Saul, why he did this. And he said, for a newsletter like ours, so often people say they don't really see themselves in the news. They don't understand their role. I want to give people the opportunity to engage and be part of it. It's really cool and a really powerful way to drive engagement. The other piece with engagement is you could use this one-to-one engagement to improve your content strategy. Surveys and polls are great for this. I love what the team at WTF is SEO did way back in the day when they were just starting. They wanted to know, is the type of content we're publishing too advanced, not advanced enough? Tell us so we can adjust our strategy on the fly. It's a really smart use of polls and engagement to improve a content strategy. Some of the best newsletters also lean into different formats. They don't just have one way that they can engage with readers. It's not just one topic. It's not just one format. So you'll see organizations that'll have a daily email product that goes out, but also different sorts of things. Like New York Mag has a daily email, but also a daily what to read thing that's built around one great story every single day. They've designed this almost like a breaking news alert, except instead of breaking news, it's here's one thing we want you to check out and spend time with. Really cool, different products to engage different audiences. Sometimes these products are built around a really specific theme. I love how Nice News does this. Their founder, Sean, started this during the pandemic a couple years ago. There was a lot of bad news out there, and he said, shouldn't there be a place that just rounds up some of the good, more positive stories that are out in the world? He created this. A couple years later, 750,000 people read this email every single day. Really cool use of newsletters. I like how teams will try different formats too. On the right, this is an example from St. Louis Magazine, kind of a traditional regional magazine. They cover a lot of, lifestyle sorts of things. It's design, it's food and drink, it's what to do this weekend, it's music. But I like that they're building different products for different audiences. Here's one they launched this year, built all around the business community and trying to serve them. Specific audience, a specific value proposition. They can build something pretty powerful in the long run with different sorts of products. I really like when teams also think about different sorts of things that aren't, regular ongoing newsletters. Two great examples here of short-run email products. On the left is an email course from the Washington Post. It's called Baking Basics. Joy the baker, who some of you, if you spend a lot of time on Instagram or Pinterest, Try to combine those into one word, interest, new social media network that I've just invented right now. The Washington Post took Joy the baker and they said, hey, can you create this course to teach people how to bake? Absolutely. So sign up today, tomorrow, a year from now. You're going to get a couple emails, 8 emails over 8 weeks that are going to teach you some of the basics of baking. Really cool and a great way to get people into the funnel. The Toronto Star said, we want to have a little pop-up newsletter around the holidays. What can we do to engage readers? And they said, okay, well, what if we combined elements of kind of the Advent calendar with a newsletter? And they got this cookie calendar, an email a day, a different member of their staff, importantly, not someone on their cooking or food team, just a regular staff writer who may or may not be good at cooking. And they said, cook a different cookie recipe and write about it. And every day, readers got this newsletter featuring a delightful little note from someone on their team highlighting a recipe they'd cooked. Really cool. It existed for a short window of time, but was pretty engaging. Love when teams try different formats. To me, what's so important, multiple newsletters in multiple formats means multiple chances to get people into the funnel. So if a reader says they want a daily newsletter, that's great. If they want a breaking news alert, that's great. If a reader wants a short run product, that's great. Whatever gets them into the funnel and gives us the chance to talk to them, engage with them, and hopefully monetize them in the long run is good for me and good for my business. And if a reader decides they don't want a newsletter, that's okay. We might have other ones that they can engage with that are going to serve them better in the long run. Newsletters also do an amazing job of building habit. This is something I think all email marketers could think a little bit more about. How do we start to build habits and routines? It's certainly a little bit easier with a newsletter like a daily email. This is one from my friend Pit Gottschalk. He's a writer in Germany who covers soccer, football, if you're not American, and he sends the newsletter every day at a really specific time. 6:11 a.m. Now, I'm a couple hours behind him, so it shows up at 12:11 a.m. for me, but you can see same time every single day. And he even tells readers when you sign up, you're going to get this email at 6:11 in the morning. I asked him why once, and he said, well, I want people to build that habit. I want them to know when they wake up first thing in the morning, my email is going to be there, and they know to look for it then. So often teams will ask, is there a right time to send a newsletter? The truth is there really isn't. Being consistent, though, with send time really, really matters. The same thing is true for formats. I always encourage teams to stick with a consistent format so they can find the things they want. One of my favorite examples is from WBUR in Boston, like the NPR station up there. They have actually Megan McGinnis, who runs their newsletter strategy, joined me a few years ago for a Litmus Live session, and we talked about their daily newsletter. Something they did that is so cool. Every email has this little kind of fortune cookie at the end. It's this little nugget. Um, it's a link at the very, very bottom of the email to something that is blowing up on Boston social media, TikTok or Twitter or Instagram, something like that. Usually something silly, funny, weird. Because it's Boston, it's usually something related to Dunkin' Donuts. That being said, it's there at the bottom of every single email. And readers know to scroll all the way to the bottom through all the rest of these links to find it. And we can see the behavior. We know readers make it to the bottom because they have been trained to look for this special link, this little fortune cookie at the end of their newsletter meal. It's really smart and a great way they build habit around format. Newsletters also think about measuring success when in a different way. They're thinking about growth. They're thinking about engagement. They're thinking about monetization. They're thinking about reader feedback. And they're pulling metrics from each of those buckets to understand what's working and what isn't. Here's an example of what I do with my newsletter. I use a tool called Glue Letter to pull some of the data out of my email service provider. And then I look at a few things. I'm looking at engagement. How many people engage with at least one newsletter in a month? How many people engage with a newsletter for the very first time? And I'm looking at these retention curves that you see on the right. Those readers who signed up in October, November, how many of them are still around and opening or clicking? It takes a lot of different metrics to really understand what's working and what isn't so you can improve your strategy. Newsletters also grow in very, very different ways than what some of you might be used to. The best newsletters I find use 4 different growth quadrants to grow. They're thinking about owned, earned, algorithmic, and paid growth. They're not just relying on one quadrant. They're using all 4 to grow. I'll walk through each of these. Owned growth refers to those tactics that you can deploy on your website on channels that you completely own and operate. It might be something like a landing page. This is one from the Swedish books newsletter Boktugg. I'm delighted that I got both a Swedish newsletter called about books and a newsletter called Pop Bitch into one Litmus Live Talk. It's a real moment for me. Thank you so much. You can create landing pages. You can add sign-up modules to your header or footer. You can deploy pop-ups or toasters or registration walls on story pages or blog posts. You can use user-generated content or polls to engage readers, like the Berkshire Eagle does here. They ask a question, ask people to vote, and then they have a sign up for their newsletter. Also, take note, it's a really good example of an org that has thought carefully about their why. You've just finished a poll about Sundays, who scoops the best Sundays, the Berkshires. And then they tell you, one of the best parts about summer is the food. Would you like to be added to our food list? It's chock full of recipes and sent every Tuesday for free. They've clearly thought a lot about what their why is and who their audience is. Dedicated emails. Hey, you're on a list. Do you want to sign up for a second newsletter? Those can also be really powerful. Earned growth is a really interesting opportunity. These are partnerships, these are collaborations. It's one org saying, hey, let's promote you in exchange for you promoting me. We see this a lot these days, especially in the independent news space, that indie news space. People on Substack, on Kit, on Beehive, on Ghost. There's a lot of great cross promotion happening there. Earned growth is really powerful for some of those indie operators. Syndicating content, all of these could be things that help you earn some growth. Algorithmic growth is also pretty powerful as well. It's getting less and less important with social media changes and SEO changes, but there's still value here. Promoting on social, thinking about landing pages that are optimized for search or social. When I'm sharing my newsletter on Twitter or LinkedIn, what's it going to look like? How do I optimize for those channels? All of those really matter. And lastly, paid growth. Some of the fastest growing newsletters out there, they're thinking about spending money on Facebook or other channels. They're really, really clear and they really understand, what's the customer acquisition cost that we should have to acquire an email address? What's the lifetime value of these email subscribers so we know what to spend? They're running giveaways or sweepstakes, sometimes referral programs to encourage people to share. Lots of different tactics to get people onto their list and build a better newsletter program. And lastly, monetization. Newsletters just monetize differently. Best-in-class emails don't just rely on one strategy. Plenty of orgs like the Baltimore Banner, they focus on reader revenue, subscription, membership, donation, but you'll also see orgs that are selling ads, products, merchandise, tickets to events or services. And I like that teams get creative with this. This is Rough Draft Atlanta, ROUGH draft, except on days when they have an advertiser who's related to the pet industry, in which case they become Rough Draft Atlanta. They're creative with the ads. It's not just a banner ad that people skip by. They really try to incorporate ads in a native and natural way to the newsletter, and it works. Readers love it, and of course, advertisers love the response. But by trying multiple different revenue streams, they really open up possibilities for long-term success. I love that newsletters experiment with different CTAs to drive revenue. They'll try thank yous or text-based ads. They'll run house ads like this one on the bottom right. This is from Crikey in Australia. And they'll try innovative tactics. The letter within the letter approach here from Grist is really smart. You're already in a newsletter, and we have a letter within that email to encourage you to support our work. Really smart. Lastly, newsletters take a story-based approach to selling. It's not just about sales or deals or offers. They're putting their personalities and their voices first. People from all parts of the org, from on the left, Mission Local, who put their managing editor, Joe, right up front, to Sahan Journal, which put one of their, their beginner reporters, one of their cub reporters, right up front and said, hey, you should be in one of these emails, talk about your work, talk about why the work matters. By incorporating different people and telling stories about who they are and why they do the work they do and why this work is worth supporting or buying a ticket from, whatever it is, the CTAs never get stale, and you're always giving readers something new to explore. To wrap this whole thing up, when I look at the newsletter space, I see an industry that is trying lots of different things. They're experimenting with different content formats, with reader engagement, different growth strategies, and certainly different sales strategies. For you, as email marketers, keep looking outside your orbit for inspiration. You never know where the next great idea might come from. I want to say thank you to the team at Litmus for having me. Here's my email. Here's my newsletter. I'd love to have you there as well. Thanks so much.